Can you say decentralized organizations again?
Decentralized organizations.
Beautiful. Looks like you're awake. Great. And we're going to just refer ourselves to 5 different kind of characteristics around these organizations, okay? You can look at this in many different ways, but we're in some ways trying to put a lot of complexity and put it into 5 little buckets so that we don't get lost. Is that okay? So give me one more other click. We're going to go one by one, and this is going to be a working workshop. Perfect. So there's 5 different ones, and we're going to go one by one. The first one is management structure. Can you say management structure?
Management structure.
Can you say second, culture? Culture. Can you say resource, support, and decision distribution?
Resource, support, and decision distribution.
Can you say function and roles?
Function and roles.
And can you say communication?
Communication.
Okay, good. So we're going to look at this 5, and the way that we're going to go about this is when I say, how does it work in centralized? How does it work in decentralized? Okay? And where are you at in that spectrum? Okay? Are you ready to get to work for the next 30, 35 minutes? Is that good? Yeah. Give a high five person left and right. Say, I am ready.
I'm ready.
Soy listo.
Soy listo. Okay, now it's all you, Papa.
Woo, woo, woo. One more click, one more click, one more click.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you good, you good. How things get managed. We're going to talk about the management structures, differences, distinctions between centralized, decentralized organizations. One more click, por favor. Okay, are people familiar with the term command control? Right, someone commands you because they control your salary, that sort of thing, or they control certain resources that you have, so you get commands. What types of organizations have that type of structure? Most of them. Hospitals, schools, businesses, a lot of different types of organizations that we've all been in from the times that we're kids have this type of structure. On the other side, in decentralized organization, people aren't commanded to do something. You can't command them often because you don't pay them. They're volunteers. How many volunteers do you have like in the cosecha houses right now? You have 10, and how much are you paying them? Like very, just enough for them to eat, basically. You know what I mean? You're not even paying them really at all. Yeah, exactly. You know, like there's no way that anyone could come in and say you have to do this, you have to do that, because they would be like, I don't agree. Fuck you. You know what I mean? Basically, right? And so, can I get one more click? The types of structures that you build to help manage people, to help guide people when you're in a self-organizing, decentralized network are not managerial structures in the sense that we normally think of them. I'd like to think of it more as janitorial structures, in the sense that we're here to support. We're not here to command and control people. We're here to support people. We're here to make sure that the needs are being met for everyone so that people are empowered and they have the ability to start projects. They have the ability to take initiative. How many of you have ever been part of an organization, you've had a brilliant idea and it got shot down? What did you do after that? Leave. Check out. Do a bad job. Yeah, that's right. On the thing that you were commanded to do a shitty job, right? And this happens all the time. I've seen leaders leave my organization, leave other organizations because their ideas, their contributions weren't being valued. Their initiative wasn't welcome. It wasn't welcome. And so in the self-management structure, you're not commanding people to do things, you're supporting them to take on initiative, giving them the conditions and the tools they need to make those good decisions and to reach for and what this also enables is the ability to have accountability across the organization. A lot of times when we were talking about the healthy and toxic cultures, someone, I don't know who it was, said that in a toxic culture, criticism and critique is often used as a weapon, used as a tool, right? It's only accountability is this word that like makes us itch. We're like, oh God, because it just means someone fucked up and we have to have a conversation about it, right? That's all accountability generally means, you know. It doesn't become a breathing, living thing where we're really figuring out how are we actually embodying the values that we're talking about? How are we actually getting to the goals that we're talking about? And what happens is the accountability usually comes from the center out to everybody else and rarely returns. And if it does return, there's rarely the ability to actually do anything about it, except for talk shit or maybe out-organize them, right? in a self-management organization, everybody is responsible for holding everyone accountable. Because the principles, the values, these things have been front-loaded. They're clear, they're explicit. It's not implicit what's going on, it's explicit. And everybody is empowered to not only take initiative, but to hold each other accountable to what those stated goals are. Can I get one more slide? And so what we want to ask you to do real quick is to think to yourself, where are you? Where is your organization on this spectrum? If 0 is command, control, that might, maybe like military might go over here, that type of culture. And all the way to the 10 is people, they do whatever the hell they want, So take a second and think to yourself, where are you right now? And where do you want to be? Diego.
It was really hard since trying to we revive the structure, the organization, but I would say it's 3/4 to control and command, because over there,
if you had to put a number between 1 and 10, what would you put? What would you say? What did you
I'll
say?
be like a 4.
A 4? Okay.
Right there.
Where do you want to be?
10. Well, 9. I said 9. 9.
Ambition.
9.
Ambition. I like it. Though I do want to say, when we're thinking about changing our organizations, what did we say earlier about changing our organizations? It's hard. And sometimes it's easiest to think about, in the next 6 months, in the next year, what are some, we eat a pizza. How do we eat a pizza? One slice at a time. Can I get another answer? Anybody else get a chance to think about where they are right now?
We were kind of talking about if a group is making a decision collectively, it's not necessarily self-managed, because you can't just go off and do something, but it's not command and control either. How does that exist on the spectrum?
So we're in the middle then. But can I ask a question though? Is the group just, what kind of organization do you have?
For example, we were talking about a cooperative, whether a house or a...
Does it have a membership, or is it just the people in the house?
Either one. It's not like one person can just go do something.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying the grouping, the members of the organization are the people living on the house or people in the house. Okay. What I'm hearing you is that among all of you, if all of you are the population, you're doing. What I'm hearing is that there is maybe something between here, which there's a lot of autonomy within the group to make decisions, right? But there's not maybe autonomy for every individual to do something by themselves, right? This refers, just to clarify, command and control. It's like, let's imagine that you were a membership organization and you were like the leading house and there were 50 other houses, and your house was the one that made decisions for the 50 houses, then you would be in command and control. Are you following me on this? But if all the 50 houses made their own decisions, you'll be more in self-management. Okay?
So the unit is more like a group as opposed to...
That is correct. We're looking at the unit. Very important. What is the unit of the organization?
And this is very important, because so often, especially in the West, we think just individual to individual. We don't think units of people relating to one another, across one another. It's very good. Thank you so much for that. Let me get one more. One more person. Where are you at? Katie.
I think we kind of landed somewhere in the middle, also because we got into what are the explicit management structures and what are the informal power dynamics and structures at play. And so then you're like, in my ideal explicit world, I feel really self-managed, and then also there's a lot of informal command and control in both the I have ownership over and the other folks have ownership over me. So yeah, just, way more complex.
Next, we're going to talk about culture and how do people relate in centralized organizations and decentralized networks and organizations. Yeah, next slide. And and something we wanted to say, we've already mentioned the relational center once, but if you really want to take a deep exploration into what the culture of radical engagement, the relational center, you need to look them up. And so when we're talking about how people relate in these different organizations, We said in centralized organizations, and some of you might resonate with this, that production is primary over relationship. Production is prioritized over relationship. Relationship doesn't say that relationship is negated. You know, I've been in lots of organizations where we all love each other. We care very much about each other, but if the goal is not reached, the relationships might break. Is have that same experience? It doesn't not to say that, there's, but now it can be very far. It's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum. I know in my organization, we've been in different parts of this. We're like at different times. We've been, it's all about the goal. It's all about the production. Sometimes where it's like it's all about the family. We really prioritize the relationship over the production. Is that always good when you do that? Not always, right? Not always. I know in our organization, we would deal with this question around, are we a family or are we not a family? People resonate with that? Has anyone had that conversation? And sometimes when you value relationship over production to the far extreme, what happens? I'm sorry? Nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. And that's not a healthy organization to be in as well, right? Because if nothing's getting done, then we're not fulfilling our function. We're not fulfilling our purpose. We're not reaching that vision. We're not closing the gap. We're not closing the gap. Oh, you got something to add, Evan?
Yeah, I do want to uplift what Lenny said though, because that resonates with me in my own experience. I've been in structured organizations that were very command and control, where the relationships were a lot more important and more meaningful, and that was how we did our organizing, in a very one-on-one kind of way, and it wasn't decentralized at all. And then I've been in something like Occupy, where our relationships were crap, and we were just running around doing all this crazy shit, and relationships were not primary over production at all. So I just wanted to honor that. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, I would definitely say I have similar experience to that, and I think that the framing is around the beginning of the section of how things get done. In a centralized organization, things can still get done even if you don't have a relational culture. In a decentralized organization, when you don't have trust, things break apart. You can't coerce anyone to do anything in a decentralized organization. You need the relationships in order to do it. In a centralized organization, it's the thing that makes it healthy, but it's not the thing that drives it in the same way.
Thank you. Yeah, next slide. And so when we're talking about increasing the relationality of our culture, there's really a couple questions that we're asking ourselves. And the first deals with trust. How much trust is there in our organization? There's a book, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's entitled The Speed of Trust. And essentially what it's arguing is that nothing moves faster than trust. That trust is what allows us to work together quickly. Have folks experienced that, where you meet somebody and you trust them and you just immediately start vibing and it immediately starts working? Yeah. Another question we're asking ourselves is, how much interdependence is there in your organization? Do people lean on one another? Do they depend on one another? Or are they working in silos? Are they not relying on one another to get the work done? And then lastly, another question that we ask ourselves is, how much clarity do we have? Because the culture that we're building is about who's in the organization. So who is this culture for? An example that I think about a lot, I've spent time organizing young people, primarily on college campuses, but also in neighborhoods and in cities, where kids, who I grew up with didn't go to college. And the culture that we have on the campus organizing scene is not for the kids from the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Have people felt that before? And we have lots of tension and lots of, what are these community norms? Elmo, wait, don't yuck my yum. What the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? People are I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm from the hood. I'm going to go, these are the conversations we were getting, because the culture we were building wasn't there for everybody. It was only there. We were inheriting a culture from other folks, and we were trying to figure out, we were struggling. How do we really build a relational culture that can recognize all the folks that we're trying to organize? But we also didn't have complete clarity on who we were really trying to organize. We hadn't made that explicit. And so it's very important that we're very explicit about who the culture is for, so that it relates to them and they can get in there. Folks, any questions about any of these questions or about any of these types of anything I just said or anything to add? Yeah.
I'm just sitting with, because we're an organization 24 years old, and we're founded for the purpose of responding to a need in the community, but it's expanded into an international training organization very organically, and now we have staff, and so and we're very much into the relational end, but yet there's two aspects. One is just we're founded by two founders, and so that relationship with and I'm one of the founders, so letting go while it expands, and also the relationship of transmitting the DNA and letting it grow. So that's one aspect. But the other thing that's happened is because we are a paid organization, people get paid, our staff does, the relational piece with being friends and the love and the power dynamic around money, it's kind of like, and just, we aren't totally decentralized. I don't know that we ever will be totally. But that's just, I'm just laying it out there. I don't expect an answer back, but it's come up. It's kind of like we're family. We love each other, and yet you get paid for your job, So it's challenging that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Just to add a piece to it, just to rest, and thank you so much for sharing. There is some resources around how to deal with compensation in the organizations, which is, and even some things that we haven't added to the list is that you cannot, to self-managers, how you do budgeting. Some people call it co-budgeting, so how do you do it, not one person does it, but how do you do it collectively? How do you do thinking about compensation? How do you do thinking about dismissals? There's all kinds of procedures that go into self-management for different kinds of situations. So, so I just also want to share that there's different principles for different things. Like there's a principle that we have taken from the Catholic Workers' House, which is called voluntary simplicity. So there's different principles that people have used to address the context of compensation because it does get on the way. Is that true or not? Yeah. Yes. So, but thank you. Hope we can maybe get into it tomorrow more.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. I saw a hand come up behind you.
Yeah, I guess I'm holding some fear around those wedges that either if to me the swarm that is attacked that then becomes stronger is complicated by when if it falls apart with trust is that is to me a really scary weakness is the ability to undermine trust and the way that that's historically been done, and they don't necessarily need to attack us as lawyers, that's per the reading, but if we are destroying each other by if that is the fundamental element, it's really scary to me that that I don't know.
That really resonates with me. There are folks, it's one of the most painful things when you lose trust with people who you've had trust with. It's one of the most painful things, without a doubt. All right, next slide. And when we talk about relational culture, we just talk about how do we. This is something that there's a worksheet on this in your guides, and we'll hear more about it in the open session, or maybe we might. But the relations has also brought us this concept of bonding and bridging. How do we build our bonds within our groups? How do we strengthen our bonds through activities like the resonance? But then how do we also bridge across groups? How do we build these relationships with other organizations, with other movements? How do we bond within but also bridge across and bring that relational culture? Because how many people have sensed there's rivalries between organizations? Has anyone ever felt that? And so we want to, the next spectrum we're doing is a spectrum of trust. And we want you to think again about your organization and where is your organization at right now? On the spectrum of high trust on one end, it should have been flipped, I think. But that's a whole nother. Well, high trust on one end. We have this whole thing. I want to call the good. Well, call the good things on the left. Anyway, it's the whole thing. But high trust on one end, low trust on the other. 1 through 10. Where are you at in your organization? Write it down really quickly. And I know y'all are just starting, so you're like, we're gonna start at a 7, maybe an 8. So real quickly, write down where is your organization at on this spectrum.
How many of you feel trust is really, really important? Yes or no? How many of you feel like that is an area that is very key? Yes or no? Okay, great. How do you think this could get complex? Yes or no? The area about trust and culture and relational, right? Again, we are talking about just, can we take a deep breath, everybody? Again, we're talking about something quite complex, and we're trying to break it in pieces. Are you following me? Can you do self-management if you don't have a relational culture, if you don't have trust? Can you do self-management? No. Maybe for a little bit of time. At some point, things will break apart. Are you following me on this? Yeah. Okay. So as you think deeper, the third thing is the question, how the resources, support, and decisions are distributed. So give me one click on it. Thank you so much. Right? So again, we're making comparisons, but in centralized organizations, what we're seeing is that many times that is centralized, and centralized is kind of hoarded, right? Decisions are made by fewer people, right? Has anybody experienced this or been part of this? Say aye. Aye. Okay, good. Nobody's guilty. Nobody's a saint here, right? That is hoarded, that decisions are doing. Also resources, right? Who controls the budget? Yes or no? Right? In decentralized, we're thinking it's more distributed. Are you following me on this? That decisions are trying to spread as much as possible. Now, are there also different kinds of decisions? Right? There are decisions that are more impactful than others. There are some others that are more minor, to put in those words. Okay, fine. Give me one more click. Some of the things that you might be thinking about distribution, okay, might be risk. This is important. I'll give you an example. In the immigrant rights movement, if you are, we're calling for a general strike, right? If you are a parent or a mother of 3 kids, you carry more risks of doing a general strike than if you're a student with no children. Yes or no? Yeah. Yes. Right? So you have to figure out how to distribute those risks around the network, because those risks can also get centralized. Support, the different labor that happens, could that get centralized in different, like we were talking about logistics early, right? That if you've been socialized female, most people swarm the way. Is that true or not? So I have to think how to break that apart. We have a little rule here in the training to try to do that. Are you following me in this? But in an organization that is as open, people are going to get organized with the norms of societies around how those things get distributed. And what we're saying is actually you have to look at it from outside and say, okay, what are the resources? What is the support? What is the work, both physical and mental, intellectual, right? What are the resources? What is the things with influence and power dynamics? And how are they distributed? I don't mean to say that there's a perfect model for this, but this is definitely how a network can get bottleneck. Are you following me on this?
Yeah. Could you say more about the bottleneck?
Well, I'll give you an example. What happens, we are acculturated to think centralized. Yes or no? Yeah. So what happens is that you go into a room and you say, hey, now you have the decisions. You do whatever you want. But then because we're so acculturated, you all come back to me and say, well, what do you really think we should do? And I make the decision. Are you following me on this? Yeah. So that is part of the culture that we live in. Yes or no? Yeah. So part of what we have to figure out is actually, okay, I need to be very explicit. And you ask me, say, look, I can give you a suggestion, but you have to make that decision and step back. Are you following me on this? Yeah. So that's part of thinking about this. Or for example, if I have a room right here, we're going to go to strike, or somebody's going to get arrested to jail, and I have a group of parents with kids and a group of students, and I say, who's going to get arrested? Most of the students might say yes, most parents will say no. Yes or no? Mm-hmm. So instead of that, we have something in cosecha, which is the line of risk, which you said, okay, the people that are doing the highest risk give the highest support at different situations. And when that changes based on context, then you switch it up. Are you following me on this? So that's taking into consideration what happens in spaces. Oh, bless you. You can keep going. Don't worry. No, we're just doing it. What this keeps in mind is how you're thinking about the risk and the resources that people are given consistently. Make sense? Deep breaths, everybody. Yes, questions?
Another question, which is, so because of the way we're socialized and oppressions in society, without a contradiction, we often do just fall back into the power dynamics that we've been taught into. So I'm curious if you could talk specifically about solutions for that. How do you redistribute work and support so that people have access to it that might otherwise not gravitate towards it?
There's many examples. One of them, for example, have people heard of the movement of landless peasants in Brazil, the MST? Some people say it's an agrarian movement for agrarian reform in Brazil. they have different kind of, they call it nucleus, which is 15 families that get organized around an encampment. They used to only have 1 leader or 2 leaders that were representative. But to create gender equality, what they have created is a rule that anybody who's representing any body of organization has to be male and female. So that's a rule that they said that any camp, regardless of who they are, needs to have both 1 male and 1 female in their context. That's what they're saying. So that's, for example, 1 rule of the organization in their context of what they're dealing with. Yeah, same thing. For example, also in work, in the MST, just to give you another example, or also just what we're doing right now, is that actually we all have to clean. So that's a simple rule. We actually, the first thing you do before we do any learning is who's going to do what, who's going to do this. We try to do, that's another way to work around managing the work. We're just trying to think about what's actually happening and how do you restructure it to rules and guidelines.
I guess it comes up for me especially in a decentralized model where there is no central control over setting the culture necessarily for each individual autonomous group where they have the power to form themselves in whatever way they wish. My fear is that they will just reform in traditional power structures and trust will break down.
They will, for sure. One thing that we haven't talked about is that how do you disseminate the DNA? And how do you do the culture of the DNA, right? And then how do you protect it? This is quite important. How do you protect the DNA? There are many different ways. I'll give you one example. For example, you have to train a lot of people in your culture, tons of people in your culture, to have little simple rules that happen. For example, in the independence movement in India, they had a rule where it was a primarily nonviolent movement. So in a primarily nonviolent movement, but what happens if you have 100,000 people on the street? Not everybody has been trained. You have fewer people in the rally that have been trained. They had this little small rule that if they will see somebody on the march doing violence or be very agitated, they will start singing this particular song. And once they will sing that particular song, everybody knew because they've been trained about it. And once you train, everybody gets trained. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? Train about it, and everybody will swarm to these 2 people. Like the move, and try to eat them, get them out of the rally or get them to calm down. Are you following me on this? Yeah. So it's to these minor things and a lot of training that you can begin to enforce the rules of the organization. So if somebody is to say, wait, here, that's not what we're about. But for that, you have to have a cadre of people that are trained to enforce the kind of culture you want to see. Was this useful? Yeah. Deep breaths, everybody. Good. Perfect. So, okay, good. Let's go one more. We're not going to fill out your sheets right now. We're going to finish this explanation. One more click. 4th thing, how responsibilities are organized. Okay? How responsibilities are organized. So how does responsibility work? Give me another click, please, Emily. In centralized, they tend to be rigid. What do we mean by this rigidity? We mean that you have a position and you cannot give it to anybody else, and that is just yours, and you have a title, and it's hard for people to create new roles. Okay? That it's more rigid. It's more people trying to figure out what is the role that everyone needs. Okay? In decentralized, we see it more fluid, meaning that there is an ability to create new roles. There is an ability to change roles, to exchange roles, do a lot of different things for roles. Give me another click, Emily. I think there's another slide there. Yeah. So what we mean is that there's more fluidity. Okay? And the first thing is that everyone has to have a role in the organization, as we already talked about, right? Every role has to be clearly defined. Now, let me tell you why this is important. Because there's no centralized command. I actually need to understand what Henry is doing. That's why we have these boards. I'll give you an example. How many of you have, in this training, have already gone to any of the trainers to ask them a question about something for logistics or anything like that? Right? Does that make sense? But actually, what we're constantly, I don't know if we're all doing it great. So if we're not doing it great, please call us out. But the whole point that we need to do is to say, okay, where's the logistic board? Where's it? On the back. Okay, great. So what is it that you need? Great, you need snacks. So you got to talk to Diego, Laura. Where are they at? I would even encourage that we should put our cell phone numbers so that we can find each other. Is this making some sense? Because there's not a command leadership that is going to tell you. You actually have to figure out how to have the communication structure to find each other out. Is this making some sense? You have to also have the ability to communicate between and across roles, right? To talk to a lot of different people. How many of you have been in an arrangement when you cannot talk to a lot of people in your organization? that there is some department that just talks them and other department and they don't really talk, right? And tomorrow we're going to have a great presentation with Sam from Movement Net Lab because they have great graphics to describe this, about how different areas of the organizations get siloed, okay? And the last piece that is really important is the roles are exchangeable. Let me tell you why this is important. Let's say Henry, right? Henry gets tired of his role, or I get tired of my role and say, hey, Henry, I'm tired. Can I be logistics support? Can you be a trainer for this piece, whatever? Henry might say, okay, Carlos, but I need to prep. I can support him. I can train him. Once he's ready, I can give him my button, and he can give me his. He can train me in what he's doing, and we're cool. Roles are not based on people's names. Roles are interchangeable. Is this making some sense? Now, let me tell you the cool thing about this thing so you can go crazy. The biggest thing on a network is matching needs with resources. I'm going to say that one more time, and I learned that from Tammy. You're writing it down, but I learned it from you. It's so good, you're like, this is good stuff. Great. No, I'm saying I learned it from you. Needs and roles. But this is the thing, right? I have a need. If there's not somebody on the command, how do I find out? Okay? But across movements, wouldn't it be awesome that if we need facilitation support, we can just say, how many of you are facilitators? Raise your hand. Facilitators? What if all of you, if we have a campaign in New Hampshire, all of you can just swarm there because you know your role and your culture and what you've been and you can do it there. You see the power of this stuff?
Could you say that one sentence phrase again?
Oh, which I said a lot of sentences.
Matching needs.
Oh, yeah, matching. So the biggest thing on a network is matching needs with resources. There's a need that everybody does, right? That's why we're going to talk about the next thing. How do you do that? So give me one more click. We're doing good. We're not going to do this stuff. Then how do people communicate? This is important. This is the last one. In communications, in centralized, most of the communication, again, we're doing a spectrum. Communication is directive, meaning that it's coming from a centralized body to one place. Sometimes there's not a back and forward. If there's not a mechanism for the back and forward. And also most of the time it's control, meaning that not everybody in the organization gets to say their own message about the organization. Are you following me on this? That there's just the national office, but not anybody else cannot do messaging. In a decentralized organization, this is way more open source, meaning that actually everybody's plugged into a system and everybody's getting all the information that they need, or some of the stuff they might not need, but they're getting a lot of information, right? And people have the ability to share content about the organization. They can also express their message and share across. It's not just one body that is doing communications, it's multiple bodies sharing information. Are you understanding how important it is to share information right now? Because it's hard. If there's not a command that is telling you what to do, you have to find out what to do. So you have to figure out, if you have a need, where do you find it? That's a communication piece. So there's two major capacities here, okay, that you got to think of your organization. The first one, can you say number one? Can you say number one again? Come on, we're going to go to the club after this. Okay, number one. People need to know where to get the information that they need and resources that they need. People need to know where to get the information and resources that they need. Are you already seeing some of the mistakes in our systems? We didn't have the Facebook group. When she asked where are the resources, we should have just been like the Facebook group. That's where we're having. That is the parts of the things that need to be overly explicit to communicate it. This is where you find this. Also, we're not telling you some stuff so you can see our mistakes. None of you have asked about the PowerPoints. I know, you thought about it. But is it important in a network that she sets it? Yes. But in most organizations, she might know about it. She might even want to say it, but there's not a platform for it. Is this making some sense? Okay. And the second piece is that there's sharing of information instead of hoarding it. And I can tell you this is super, duper, duper, duper important. Has anybody been to Washington, D.C.? Has anybody seen a congressional member or a senator or any of those politicians, right? Usually, is Washington, D.C. centralized or decentralized? Which one? Centralized. Thank you. If you doubted it, we gotta do some talking. But in Washington, D.C., information, when a politician gives you information, they're like, okay, Lila, don't share this with anybody. Yes or no? Because this is our information now. The public cannot know. Your members might not know. Your friends might not. This is ours. Are you following me on this? And who knows what at what time is the end of the day. In decentralized network, is the opposite. It's distributed, and we're always trying to push it out. And it doesn't necessarily mean, I just want to say, because I have a piece of information I haven't shared, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Are you following me on this? But it only means that maybe I don't have a practice of sharing the information I need. Deep breaths, everybody. Let's get some thoughts and questions.
It also takes so much time to share the information. I guess that's not really a question.
Let me ask you something. I said this at the beginning. Decentralized organization takes more structure, yes or no? Yes. More. Yes, it takes more. Does it take more work to decentralize? Yes, we're not saying, this is the myth of this thing. It's like, no, we just got to get on the room and we will figure it. How many of you have been in that thing and it did not work? Sometimes it works and many times it works. But what we're actually saying is you have to be overly explicit about what that is. And we spent with Fatima 2 years. 2 years. Fatima, how many retreats we spent? How many times writing things? And we still need to produce more stuff. You look at her. You just got to look at her, right? We're partners in crime. I tell you because it's not easy. But that is what allows the kind of emergence we're talking about. Now, let me ask you another question. What are some of the platforms that people already use to communicate across a lot of groups? Facebook, yes. What else? Slack. Have people use Slack here? Okay, please share on the community group. Slack is another process of keeping up with multiple conversations at the same time. Slack.com, Slack.com, right? Google Docs, people use Google Docs a lot. Yes, what else? WhatsApp. We use that a lot, yes. Signal too, yes, people use Signal too. What else?
Oh, is it? No, I'm not being sassy. I mean, like, actually, it's an app called Telegram.
Oh, it's an app called Telegraph. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's like GroupMe, but there's more.
Okay, it's like GroupMe. Have people used GroupMe? Okay, but it's more complex. Okay.
Wiki.
The wiki, there's a lot of wikis. We have one in Cosecha we're trying to figure out.
Bulletin boards are like actual bulletin boards.
Actual bulletin boards. Thank God.
Events, like hanging out.
In different spaces sometimes. That's right. Okay. Good.
One-on-one, sitting in a chair across the person.
Yeah. But is that a platform for broad communication?
Well, or within your organization.
Yeah, but
Which we've lost.
but
Is that not a platform?
no, it's not, because what we're saying is that what is a platform that a lot of the people in your membership can access basic information.
So it's larger.
It's larger. That is correct. It's much. How does everybody? People also use Google listservs, right? But it's just there's many tools, by the way, and some of them are good and some of them suck, and some of them a lot of people don't want to use them, which is a whole other thing. But what we're saying is, how do you get the information you need? That is the question that we're trying to answer with the communication system. And if that is not happening, like for example, if you in Cosecha, we are like running a mega march, and some people are like, well, what's the strategy of Cosecha? And they don't have a way to communicate with us. We lost those people, all those people are going to do whatever they want in their own way. And this goes part to the question that you said about how do you protect the culture? How do you protect the DNA? How do you do it? Well, you have to have some of the communication mechanisms for that. Because in that mechanism is how people can regulate. And do people do all this on Twitter? Yes or no? What's one thing that the Black Lives Matter movement has done on Twitter? What's one thing that they always regulated on Twitter? Within their membership and the people. They're all trained on this. And the hashtag. Which hashtag? But when somebody says all lives matter, yes or no? They swarm to that to try to, it's like, no. People have unconsciously been trained, well, not, I'm sorry, unconscious, but people have been trained about that. Is this making some sense? And Twitter is a platform that they have to do that. Deep breaths, everybody.